Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our June Quick Tips. For those of you who are new, which I will, for the purpose of the video later on, I'm Morgan Stentz. I'm actually the former roving archivist. I am now a digitization technician with the Wyoming State Archives, just helping cover and keep this program going. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that today's meeting is recorded and will be available on the Wyoming State Archives' YouTube page. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today. This program is only made possible thanks to the American Heritage Center, the Wyoming State Archives, and the Wyoming State Historic Records Advisory Board. This program is funded by grants made available through the Wyoming SHRAB by the National Historical Publications and Records Commission and administered by the Wyoming State Archives as part of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. Before we get into the topic today, just so everyone knows, you can pop your questions in the chat or feel free to stop Beverly as she's presenting. She has made that known so that way we can share our questions, but you can also put them in the chat and we'll have a questions section at the end. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Beverly Perkins from the Buffalo Bill Center of the West.
Thank you. Okay, the thing is with my screen, I can't see you all, which is a bummer for me, but I also can't see the question column. So just speak up. I do a monologue, but I love to answer questions and interact with you all. This PowerPoint is really pretty dense because I wanted to have the information on the slides so that you wouldn't have to take notes. So I didn't put my contact information, but my email is Beverly P, BEVERLYP @centerofthewest.org. I didn't put that on here. So, okay, I'm just going to cover some topics that are important for your collections in terms of conservation. And maybe an important thing is that you know that I am a resource for state parks and big museums, small museums in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. Conservators tend to be coastal people, so there aren't as many of us, especially in the mountain region. Okay. Alrighty, so, and these are just scattered important thoughts that I wanted to share. That's the theme holding this presentation together. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is CAP surveys, or collections assessment for preservation surveys. They're administered by AIC, which is the American Institute for Conservation. And that is our membership organization. So it's akin to AAM or AASLH, but it's conservators and preservationists and also some collections managers. So here you have an image of what you would get if you go to the AIC website and or even just Google CAP, Collections Assessment Preservation Program. They've made it so that it's easy to apply. It's not a big deal because we use these surveys to then go on and apply for funding for the projects that are listed. So what happens is you get an architect, a preservation architect usually, and a conservator to come and visit your institution. And we look at everything from obviously the building, but where you are in the community as far as where your institution sits physically and also kind of politically in your community. And we cover security. We talk about if the volunteers are too powerful and they're moving collections around. We talk about the environment, storage issues, all of those things. What we really do is listen to you all. And it's really weird, but if an outside person that gets paid to write a report they tend to listen to us. And then you have a report to submit with your IMLS or NEH preservation grant proposals. Just ask questions if you have a question. Okay. So the only state park I've done a CAP survey for is Guernsey State Park. And I think state parks are very interesting because the buildings are always very interesting, and the collections and the issues you all have, because sometimes the collections are in really old buildings that don't have great environmental controls. And so it's up to us to help you solve those problems. Anyway, I think that's a really great first step. And then what we provide at the end of the report is a list of priorities. And so if you start to work on those priorities and you submit that in a grant, they can tell that you have the whole collection in mind. If you have a painting that you want to conserve, they know where that fits in the needs for your institution. So sometimes I review grants, and sometimes if there's a proposal to treat a painting and it's just presented as that in a vacuum, I don't know where that sits really in the priorities of the needs of your collections. So, okay, that's the first step. Now, how do you hire a conservator? You can always contact me. You can always contact me. I love Wyoming, and I'm a resource for you. But if someone calls you and says, I have a 200-year-old spinning wheel or something, and it's a mess and it needs conservation, what can you tell them? So of course, you never recommend one conservator. You can send them to the American Institute for Conservation, AIC, website that I listed on here. And then you go to resources, and then you go to consult a professional. And then you enter your location, your medium, paintings, stone, building, and then tell them what you want, which is usually a treatment. But I think the list includes survey, condition reports, storage. It includes all kinds of things. And then you get a list of people. So you get a list of conservators, and AIC has different levels of membership. So anyone can join because we like to share information in our profession. And then once you've been in the field for a while and you have your education and training and you're working in the field, then you can apply to be a professional associate, and you're reviewed by your peers. And then if you get to be older and you have worked in the field and are respected, and you have maybe also worked for AIC, some volunteering to serve on boards and things, then you become a fellow. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because this is one of the things you're going to look for if you're trying to pick a conservator. So you want a fellow if possible, and then a professional associate is good because you know they're a professional conservator. A member can also be a framer or someone that has hung a shingle up and is training as they go. So I wouldn't necessarily go for just a member. So professional associates and fellows, they have an advanced degree in art conservation. That could be anything from a Master's of Art, a Certificate of Advanced Study, or a Master of Science. There are 4 programs in the United States, and sometimes they're very similar in the training, but their master's degree is a different master's degree, but similar training. Any questions? Okay. So conservators specialize. If you look up a conservator, or you're Googling conservators, and they say that they work on paintings, paper, carriages, and photographs, that's really not a great thing, because I wouldn't work on photographs. I'm an objects conservator. I wouldn't work on paintings, although I would surface clean paintings. But the thing is about going to conservation school, which is 3 years, is you learn about paintings and paper. You work on those things before you specialize. So you can then pick a paintings conservator that you want to give your painting to for treatment. And you can also review what they're proposing to do to your painting. And I'm also happy to do that if you pick a conservator and you say, does this sound right to you as a treatment? I can review that with you. Let's see. So usually I recommend that people contact a conservator and ask them, like by email, send them pictures of the object. They might be able to give you a ballpark estimate of how much they're going to charge and also what they're going to do to your object. Then once, if you say, okay, I'm going to go with you, Conservator A, they'll give you a written condition report with a treatment proposal that you will either agree to or not agree to. If they change that treatment without coming back to you for approval, that's not a valid practice in our profession. Okay, so I'm skipping topics, but I'm going like, what is most important for the care of your collection? So what are good plastics? Now, I'm not talking about the collections. So if you have a collection of Bakelite purses or other materials that are plastic, I'm not talking about the collections. What I'm talking about is plastics that you're going to use in storage furniture or in covering plastics, sheeting, or storage materials. Like one person built all of their shelving out of PVC pipe, and what you're trying to avoid is chloride in your plastics. So chloride will cause your metal objects to corrode. So it's the chloride in the plastics. So they off-gas all kinds of different things. I'm going to leave this slide for you to look at later. But there is a way of testing plastics for use with your collection. So generally speaking, if the name of the plastics has chloride in it, like polyvinyl chloride, it's not good. Don't use that plastic. If it has polyvinyl, polyacetate, things like that are okay because they don't have the chloride name in them. So, but you can check with me. You can also check, you can look at the MSDS sheet for that plastic and see if it lists chloride. Also, if it's a dry cleaner bag, it has all kinds of plasticizers in that bag to keep it supple and not cracking, and that's not good for you either. So dry cleaner bags go out of your collection. You don't use them for storage or anything else. So here's an interesting thing that I like to share. It's called the Beilstein test or Blystein test. It has all kinds of different pronunciations depending on who's talking about it. But it's really fun. You just take, I'm going to skip to the next screen because this screen is for when you try to do it yourself. Okay, so you take a copper wire, like I went to Ace, I bought copper wire that splits, you know, you can, as you can see on the screen, you can split it into smaller wires, and you use that with, if you're just down and dirty, I use it with a lighter, and I'll make a flame on the lighter. First of all, I'll put the one strand of copper in the flame of the wire to remove any plastic that's there from the last test I did. And then you can see all the holes on the plastics on the left. So then I'll stick that wire, I'll get that wire hot. I'll stick it in that plastic, and then I'll stick it back in the flame. And that copper and that bad plastic with chlorides in it will make a green flame, just as you see on the right of your screen. So when I'm doing this, what I have is bad plastics, so I can use those as knowns so that I know I'm not crazy, because they will produce a green flame. And then if you have a plastic box that you think you might want to use for storage, you do the same thing to that. And if it doesn't produce a green flame, then you're good to go. Okay, going on. So a board member, a senator, and a beloved volunteer leave the bar and enter the museum. These are really not museums, but some museums that I visited, it's not that far off. And that's the reason you want a collections group, a collections policy, and a collections committee, because a lot of us come into the museum as a new staff person, and we're amazed by all the stuff that they have in the collection that they don't really want. And the way to mitigate that is to not take things in that you don't want. But it's hairy when a board member comes with their grandfather's boots that they used on the local ranch, and they want to donate them to you because they're important to them, but they're not important to your collection. So the first thing to do is get together and write a collection policy. You know, what's the mission of your institution? What stories are you trying to tell? So now you have a policy, and you can use that to say to people, I'm really sorry, they're wonderful boots and they have a great history, but they don't follow our collection policy of where our institution is collecting at the moment. Sometimes museum people are hoarders, and if I go and do a CAP survey, especially history people and cultural material people, which I am, we tend to want to keep things. We have a curator here who says that's just such a great desk. It's a wonderful desk, but it doesn't have anything to do with our exhibitions or planned exhibitions, or an importance to our collection. And so sometimes my job is to help them realize that we don't have room for all the great things that were offered, but that don't fit with what we're doing. The next really important thing is to form a collection committee. Now, if your institution has 5 staff members, I think I would use those 5 staff members, and maybe someone from your local community that's interested and volunteers with you or helps you. Or if you have boards, I'm not sure that you have boards, but you could also ask people from other state parks to be on the collection committee. Now, you can either meet in person or you could do this by Zoom. So what happens with that is those people get together and they consider objects that are being offered for accessioning, whether you were buying them or they're giving them, or it also could include loans. It also includes things that you want to de-accession, like the desk, because you never want to do that alone so that you're the one person who decided that that desk has nothing to do with anything. The committee is almost to cover your patoote, so that in the future, a group decided to get rid of the desk, but also it gives you a point of saying, gosh, you wanted to give your grandfather's boots. I ran them through, I sent them through the collection committee, and it was decided that although they're wonderful, they don't fit our mission. So that gives you an out also with keeping your collection clean.
Sierra,
Okay.
looks like you have a question.
Yay.
Yay. Hi. Sorry. So
Hi.
about your curation team. So how would you navigate, like, okay, you use the staff that you have, right, that you hired, but
Right.
you're also going to need to bring in other people from the community. But how would you navigate with people that have different opinions on that, basically? Because there have been times where a committee like that has been formed, but they never seem to agree with one another. So
Okay.
would you even consider like adding people so they don't fight? And
I think it's, we're lucky here because we have enough staff members and we don't include board members on our committee, but we do pass our decisions on to the board and they're like, yeah, because also part of this is whoever is sponsoring the booths or the desk, they present to the committee and they have to have a really good, argument that has included other staff members. So they'll include me as the conservator. Is it in good condition? Will it cost money to conserve? Is it huge, like a printing press? Do we have room for storage for that? So it's already gone through some of those considerations. So the argument is really good. But here's what we do. We use electronic voting. So after the meeting, we know what the curator wants to do or the director wants to do, but then we vote and no one sees our votes but the person who is facilitating that voting app or whatever it is. And so if it doesn't pass, if it doesn't get a majority, then it doesn't pass.
yeah, that makes sense. But like, okay, with our collections, we typically bring in our elders. So I work with Native American Archives. I'm Native American myself. And with our collections that we take care of or even want to display either online, we tend to bring these people in to talk about it. And again, they have very much mixed opinions. And
Yes.
because our elders are so knowledgeable, it very much feels like a pick and choose, because some of them are like, oh yeah, and then the others are like, no, you can't do that. And yeah, so that's why I'm like, how do you walk that line and I guess make it, there's a specific word I'm thinking of, but I can't think right now. But
right, well, politically wise for you and the institution. Yes, it gets very hairy. So we're also lucky here in that each of they call them 5 museums, but I don't know who did that because it's crazy, but they're really collections and exhibition areas. So we're lucky that our Plains Indian collection, the board members are all local. I think they're all pretty local, tribal people, and the curator, it's her job to have already, as you did probably, already figured out, do you want to take these or not? Or do you want to de-accession these or not? And so she makes the argument. And but I know that they don't always disagree. They don't vote, but she will consider that in her presentation to the collection committee. So let me think about that one. Okay, do you mind emailing me?
yeah, definitely.
And I'll ask Hunter, our Plains Indian curator, because that's really a great question. How do you navigate that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some very strong, opinionated board members who sometimes are renegades. And so, they buy us stuff and we're like, oh, okay, thank you. So we're taking that in. And so, yeah, sometimes you just have to do what's wise for you and your institution.
Yeah.
But email me, beverlyp@centerofthewest.org, and we'll start a conversation because that's a great question.
Which
Awesome.
I was able to put your email in the chat, and it's pinned there. So if anyone needs it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. If we can, yeah, I'll see what she does because she's very, they really appreciate her, and so they appreciate her opinion highly, and she's very thoughtful and well spoken. So I know she's been thinking about, how am I gonna present this and stuff. But yes, they're not on the committee, so that's a good question. Okay. Okay, moving on. Anybody else? Okay, so here's another thing, and all of these that I bring up are because I've lived through them, and our institution or another institution where I worked have lived through them. So you don't want to bring in objects like where we have a person who trusts the curator to present two very similar objects by contemporary artists. And so she'll have 20 objects to present to him. He's a guy. And not necessarily having the objects in here, but a lot of times they'll all come in. And then those two, the guy who wants to donate the one object to us and buy the other object for his collection, it's already a little ethically weird because if we have one in our collection and he buys one, his collection item just went up in value. So it's already a little interesting, but the curator and the donor walk around and they pick which objects they're going to go for. And then his stipulation is the objects that he gives to the museum have to be on exhibition. And you never want to do that because 20 years down the road, you don't want that same object on exhibition for maybe a number of reasons. Maybe it's an object on paper or leather, and you don't want it to have been on exhibition for 20 years. But also, our missions change, our thoughts change, and now we're stuck with some of these things on exhibition. So that's my number one thing. And then the one where they say, I have a collection and it includes 5 Remingtons and a Van Gogh, but I also want you to take, the things from my great-grandmother's ranch, which I've seen museums with, old tissue boxes and hairbrushes and things that were donated with that collection. And you really don't want to get into that either. And so it's just something that you can write into your collections policy. And then every once in a while, it gets presented at the collections committee and we all together weigh whether it's, whether we want that object bad enough to go ahead, and we try to negotiate the stipulations, but anyway, those are my major points on how to keep your collection not goofy. Okay, changing topics, thinking about light damage. So obviously, this object used to be this great pink, but that's where the lapel was, guarding the colorant of that object, but it's gotten too much light exposure. Oh gosh, some of these slides are like this dense, but it's so you can look back on them. So why, if I can't change anything, would I have it by a data logger and keep track of that? Again, it's so that you can make a point that the light levels are too high here, so the objects should not be displayed in this area. Sorry. You can also use it. It's great to use in a grant. I think most of the grants that I review are about institutions looking to improve their environment. So it could be storage furniture, it could be different lighting, it could also be coverings for the glass that cut out the ultraviolet light coming in. So even though you feel like I'm powerless, what can I do about this? The data is really useful. And also maybe you're just fighting with the site manager that says, no, those objects have always been there and they need to stay there. Well, if you show that they're going to be damaged or have been damaged, they should let you move them. So light damage is cumulative. So high light levels for a short period might cause the same damage as low light levels for a long period. So we try to rotate our works on paper that are susceptible, watercolors, paintings, not as much. I have a chart on the next slide. Textiles can be very sensitive, and even firearms that have bluing, that bluing can fade in sunlight. So simple things like using window shades. At peak sun times, we have some of those where we shut them during the morning hours when the sunlight is coming directly into our windows. Let's see. You can even plant a tree in front of the window to block some of that. UV blocking plexiglass is expensive, but if I had the first photograph ever taken in the United States, I would show it for very short periods of time, 2 weeks. I would not keep the lights on after hours. I would use UV blocking plexiglass in the frame, and even some, you've probably been in museums where they have motion sensors to turn the light on, or even as extreme as having a black curtain that the visitor has to, flip up and open. A lot of times here, if they're not, if the person isn't wanting to see the original copy of the Declaration of Independence, we have things like magazines and photos and prints, and we make digital copies of them. And they're really good, and we put it on the label that this is a digital copy, but then you don't have to worry about rotating it off of exhibit after 5 months or something like that. Most museums don't have the depth of collection to be able to show 5 of the same poster rotated over different months. Even we don't have that. But when people say we're going to take that off and let it rest, it's not really resting, but it sounds good to people when you really want to take it off of view because it's had too much light exposure already.
Beverly, do you have recommendations based on object types for how long things should be exhibited for?
Yes, I'm coming up to that.
Okay.
At least with light levels, and if I don't cover that, I can cover that.
Perfect. No, that's great.
And so, but good question. So light meters really aren't that expensive, and they're really easy to use now. So this I got off of Amazon. Again, you want to take those readings so that you have a record of that, and take them at different parts of the day. So you have one of our galleries is just like flooded with light in the morning, and then we can raise those screens because we know that the sun has passed over on top of the building and the light levels are perfectly acceptable in the afternoon. We do have a few lights on in the gallery that are just for emergency, and also because we have guards, a guard at night who walks around, so we don't want them walking around in the dark. But basically, we turn lights off, and we don't have anybody permanently working in storage. So we don't have, office desks where people have to work in storage, because then you have to regulate the environment for humans, so the relative humidity and the heating and cooling, but also you don't have the lights on all the time. anyway, so if you're building a space, you don't want anybody permanently working in your storage area. That I just threw in as an extra little tip. Okay. So light levels for museum collections. I'm going to go back if I can. So most, you can see this guy down in the right corner says FC, that's foot candles, or lux. And so you can flip it back and forth between those two readings. But the cool thing is 1 foot candle equals 10 lux. So I read in foot candles because I think it sounds more historic. I don't know. I like foot candles. So, so 5 foot candles is 50 lux. So for photographs, 5 foot candles, and UV plexi, if the photograph is really important and it's the only one, and then dark when you're closed. Make a digital copy, because how important is it for the person to see the real photograph? Or are you trying to show them, like, are you a photography museum, or are you more a history museum where you're trying to show the image, not necessarily the original photograph? So on exhibit or on loan for a maximum of 5 months. That's the other point. When we loan objects, we really consider how long is that loan, and we demand what we see as the proper foot candle level. And sometimes some of our objects go on loan, and then they'll go to 4 other venues. So we will refuse to loan photographs for that long, or works on paper, or we might rotate them out in the middle of that exhibition run. And I forgot, but I'm actually the bad guy in the museum, and I'm happy with that. It's my role to say, so they can say the conservator has not approved this for loan. You can always use me. Don't forget, I'm here as your resource. Okay, so textiles and works on paper, pastels, oil stick, any of those things. So they're 5 foot candles as well, but they can stay on view for 10 months, a year. And again, if you have the money and you can get UV plexiglass, do that. And don't hang it where it's going to get direct sunlight. Okay, organics such as leather and fibers. So that can be 10 foot candles, 15 foot candles, and they can be up for about 2 years, not in direct sunlight again, because if they're in direct sunlight, not only are they getting light damage, but they're also getting that thermal energy from the sun. And so organics will expand and contract as they cool and warm. So you don't want that to happen. And kind of the same with wood, but we all have furniture in our collections. And so that can take 15 foot candles, and it can stay up for many years, which is what we have to do. Okay, paintings can also take 15 foot candles, and they can stay up for many years as well. Not in direct sunlight. Okay, stone and metal and ceramics, you're pretty much good to go. And as I said, some bluing on metal can fade in direct sunlight.
Sierra, you had a question?
Yes.
Hi, sorry again. So what is your take on materials that are both organic and non-organic material?
Man, I was just going to talk about that.
Oh, were you?
No, I really was, because I thought, oh, I should explain. Yes, like composite objects.
Yeah.
Yes. So I always go with the more sensitive material as far as light levels go. But those are the materials that you have to, you really consider the relative humidity. And you can affect the relative humidity levels by bumping up your temperature or lowering your temperature in your room. So I would go with, okay, so let's talk about a firearm. So we have a lot of firearms in this collection, a lot. Did I say a lot? Okay, but so you're worried about the wood taking on moisture and letting off moisture, and so that wood, you know, will expand and contract. So sometimes that's okay. It can expand and contract as long as it's not in a flood or in a sauna where it's going to be extreme and it won't go back to its original kind of stable state. But when you lock that wood into an object, so the wood is held in by the metal and the metal doesn't expand and contract, then the problem becomes your wood is expanding, but it's held by the metal. And so it can crack because it doesn't fit in that space anymore. And then when it dries out, it's already kind of stressed by being smashed in by the metal, and then it can crack as well when it dries. So, but I always go for, and I don't always get my way, but I always go for the lower light levels. Like 5-foot candles is not much light. So you also want to think about where it's being exhibited. So if you're trying to show something in 5-foot candles, but the visitors have been in a very bright room, you might want to give them some space to adjust so they don't feel like they're walking into a dark space where they can't see the objects. I can also, I think after this, I will send along some reference material that you can look up these things and read more about them. Okay? Any other questions? So you can read about case studies and what people learned and how they dealt with some of this stuff. It's easier in a large institution, but if your museum is a log cabin, has a log cabin on it, on the property, and you're trying to deal with all these issues, you can only do what you can do. And so talk through it with other people, call me up and we can talk through it. And you can only do the best you can do, really.
Yeah, I was only really asking, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, because we have, or this is what I have seen in a museum that is here on the reservation, not managed by us, but he has dolls displayed, and these dolls are made of, you know, yarn, nylon stocking.
Right.
And some of these dolls also have human hair in them.
Yes.
So that's why I was like, okay, how would you like navigate that? Plus the beads, the porcupine quills, or because you know the beads are glass beads, they're Czechoslovakian or they're Japanese beads, and buckskin, obviously.
Right.
So I was like, okay, so how would you like navigate that? Because it's natural, but then it's also man-made materials combined as one.
Right. So I go for the lowest denominator. So like in the past, when I first started in conservation 35 years ago, we were using hygrometers, and they use hair, human hair, because it expands and contracts so well. So yes, so you have materials that are going to be doing all kinds of different things. So the thing you want to do is, can you hold on one second? You guys? So you worry about the light levels, but not as much as you worry about the relative humidity. So with relative humidity, what you really want is stable. So we're in such a dry climate. Our collections have been living at 25, maybe 15% relative humidity in the winter when we have our heaters on. And so you don't have to worry, oh my gosh, everybody says they should be at 50% relative humidity. What you want to do is keep them maybe a little bumped up from 10 or 15%, but you need to leave them in an environment where they don't go through great changes. So objects can go through great relative humidity changes in one day. And you want to slow that down. They can go through great changes with the change of seasons. So with that doll, I would be more worried about the relative humidity and the fading of the textiles. But did that make any sense? So we're so dry here. We're lucky our building is not historical, but it costs a lot of money to maintain a stable environment. So the building is one box, so it's slowing down the changes in relative humidity from the outside. And then if you can put the object in a vitrine where it's covered with plexiglass, that's another box. So it's also slowing down those changes. That's what you want to do. Now, it's also expensive, but to keep the HVAC systems on when there are no visitors and no staff, I highly recommend that, because then your object isn't going through these great changes from night to day when you turn the systems back on. So it's gone through the night without the system on. You come in the morning, you turn it on, and it's just like bump. You know, it's a big change in a fast amount of time. Did that help at all?
Yeah, it does help, but I also have another one too. Have you worked with much on horsehair and animal teeth and claws?
Yes, because
So,
we have a natural history part of our museum, but we also have Plains Indian, and actually some of those materials are used in the Buffalo Bill wing and also in the art wing. Yes. So what we try to do for them is stable relative humidity.
that's fair. Thank you though for answering my question.
And okay, so you're taking your readings, so get a data logger. Those are also easy to get on Amazon. And maybe I'll include that in the list of references. And start taking readings. And you want readings so you can tell what's happening through a day and also through the seasons. And then you can apply for grants that will, once you have that data, that will help you minimize those changes by even just putting things in vitrines. Do you have those objects in cabinet? See, in storage, when I say vitrine, then it's the cabinet. And then if you have a cabinet in storage, you can also put them in an archival box. And so now it's in 3 different boxes: the building, four: the storage room, the cabinet, and then the box.
Yeah, we do already do daily checks, reading our humidity and our temperature within our repository.
Okay.
And we also, oh my gosh, I can't think off the top of my head. But anyways, we do track that, and we do make sure that it's at perfect levels as it can be, because unfortunately our repository is small and it's not exactly the best place to be. You can ask Morgan, she did see it as well. But we try to do the best that we can with our repository and with the limited funds that we do have. And we are working towards getting a museum, which is in the works, and our hopes is to have proper storage and everything so that we can preserve our artifacts as long as we can.
Okay, yes, and so tell Ben, if you have really sensitive objects, they're in storage, they're not on exhibit?
No, they are not. However, the actual cultural hub that we have, or the cultural museum, whatever, I can't remember its name, Rupert Week Cultural Center, there we go, does have objects on display, which I also like to think about as well, because we do try to help them preserve their stuff. And that also definitely needs to be moved.
And I think I did a CAP survey of you. So email me again, will you?
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm picturing an institution and I think it might be the same. So,
Okay.
and I'm
It
sorry.
is, Beverly. I actually had the opportunity to read your CAP survey.
Okay, sorry. So
No,
yeah,
it was-
and here's the other thing about a CAP survey. Once you do a CAP survey as a conservator, I would hope that you're a resource for that institution after that, as long as they'll have you. So yes, let's put our heads together. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So isn't this pretty? Don't you wish that were your collection? I tried not to put in one of the gross, insect. How am I doing on time? Oh my gosh. Okay. So here's some really simple things. People shouldn't eat at all where their collections. And they should throw any food, any Coke cans, empty coffee containers in one container, whether you have a break room or just one container, and then that trash goes out at the end of the night. Okay, I'm going to go on. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, you guys, blah, blah, blah. And then I just threw this in because we just had a really good example. This topo map on the left came in with some of the worst packaging I've ever seen in my life. They didn't even put it in a box that would give you some depth. Topo maps have depth to them. It's not a flat sheet of paper. And so it's actually plastic. But so what he did was he took a cardboard box, didn't make any depth to it. So he made actually like a folder and then put these two, I'm saying he, could be she, two bad pieces of foam plastic in there to give it a little depth, but it wasn't even enough to cover the biggest mountains. And so when it shipped, of course, it got smashed. And so it's in the lab because somebody local owns it, and we're going to work on it for them. And then on the right, we just ordered iPads, and that Apple packaging, man, those engineers have really thought out what happens if it gets hit from this side, and how can I stabilize it so that it doesn't move in that packing? But I just had those examples come in this week, so I thought I'd throw them in. Okay, I think that's it. Yes. Okay, stop sharing. Maybe I can see everybody. End of show. Click to exit. Ooh, hi.
Hi.
That's me.
Yes.
Yes, so I will make a note to put together a resource list. And what else did I say I was going to put in that?
The resource list, and you were going to...
Data loggers.
Yes, the data loggers. It's like it
And
was
then
something relevant to supplies.
I'll send that to you.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And I can send it out to those interested.
Any other questions? Thank you for spending an hour with me.
No, thank you. This has been so informative and so interesting for me. I greatly appreciate you doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and just say thank you again, Beverly, for presenting. This was so informative, and I'm so excited to see more of the resources you send. Our next session in July will be digitization for beginners with Kale Mode, right? Sarah, is that right? Okay, wanted to make sure. That will take place in July, and I will have a firmer date on that posted onto the WRAP website. It will be on a Friday at 10 a.m. If anyone has any questions after we log off, please feel free to reach out to Beverly and I. I will also put my contact information. Well, most of my contact information can be found on the WRAP website, though that is on a modified checking schedule, so please have some patience with that. Otherwise, thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.